The definition of insanity, according to Albert Einstein, is doing the same thing over and over, but expecting different results. It was this quote and a pretty shitty picture I drew while sitting at my desk in 2016 that helped me change my life. Back then, I was 29 years old. I had a pretty fancy job title, a 6-figure salary. I had an impressive array of stilettos and skirt suits. And I was living the dream that many people would aspire to. An MBA graduate, starting off a career in Deloitte, moving through industries, countries. I've done everything from finance, advertising, property to cyber analytics. I've lived in South Africa, Ireland, and all over New Zealand. But at 29 years of age, where I was at that point in my life, I was bloody unhappy. I remember vividly, I was sitting at my desk and I started drawing this picture with a biro pen on a piece of refill paper. It started with me standing with a glass of whiskey on the deck of a house that I owned. I had a dog at my feet. I had a sick 4-wheel drive truck in the driveway. I had a jet boat in the driveway. I had a horse in the paddock, and I was surrounded by mountains. And at the bottom of that picture, I wrote Laura's life in 5 years. That was May 2016. Now, I didn't draw this picture because I'd listened to some inspirational podcast or read a book that told me to visualize what you want. It's just something that came out of me. And as I sat there staring at the picture, I realized that no amount of money was going to get me there if I kept living the life I was living and making the same decisions that I was making. It wasn't just what I was doing to make a living that was unsettling for me. It was the whole way I was living my life. It's like I wasn't living it because I wasn't making any of my own decisions. For a long time, I had never had the confidence in myself. And when you don't have confidence in yourself, you let everyone else around you make the decisions for you. The men that I was in relationships with, they made decisions for me. The employers that took me on to conduct roles, they made decisions for me. The friends that I allowed to have in my inner circle, they made decisions for me. And I was so lost. It wasn't just that I didn't know who I was. I didn't even know what I wanted, what I stood for, what my values were. And being really honest, I was battling a pretty severe binging and purging disorder. I was abusing booze and drugs every single weekend. I was allowing boyfriends, which is a really strong term, but boyfriends to use me, employers take advantage of me. And every week I'd repeat the same cycle. I didn't like myself, I didn't like where I was, and I didn't like what I was doing. And then this drawing came out. Now, I've told this story many, many times on stage and in front of people, but I've never sat down in front of a camera to do this. And it's really important that I do, because people need to know that I didn't just one day sort my shit out and everything was amazing. It started with a really shitty picture in May 2016. Now, once I drew that picture, it kind of became like an ulcer in the inside of your mouth where you just keep touching it, and I couldn't leave it alone. It just infected every thought that I had for days. And I started thinking, if that is the life that I really wanted, then what the hell was I doing what I was doing? So I started thinking about, right, let's start with changing how I make my living. I wasn't getting any type of fulfillment or satisfaction with the work that I was doing. So I came up with this triangle idea. At the top of the triangle, I wrote down all of the things that I loved. Whiskey, cowboy boots, country music, being outdoors, hunting, fishing, farming. I then wrote down in the bottom left hand of the triangle all of the things I was good at. And because I didn't have a lot of confidence in my abilities, it was a pretty short list, but I remember writing down, I'm good at making people feel comfortable, I'm a good teacher, and I'm a hard worker. And then down the bottom right-hand corner, I was writing down all of the things that brought me satisfaction. Now, there's a massive difference between happiness and satisfaction. Happiness is like me riding my horse. Satisfaction is me teaching someone else how to ride my horse. Now, my big brainy idea was that the byproduct of these three things was going to be a sustainable career that I would actually stick at long enough for it to become profitable. If I could make a living doing something I was good at, that I loved, and that brought me satisfaction, then I felt like that's what I'd been really missing out on. But do you think I could think of a job where I could drink whiskey, listen to country music, be on a farm, teach people how to do stuff, and just get them outside of their comfort zones? There was no such job that existed. So 3 months after drawing the original picture, I decided to set up a company and employ myself to do all these things. Now, my original idea, based on the drawing and the triangle, was going to be setting up a business called Southern Girl Experience. It was going to be a female-only business where I set up female workshops teaching women how to do stuff that I learnt growing up. How to back trailers, how to shoot guns, how to crack whips, how to drive jet boats. The only real problem was that I didn't actually learn all of these skills growing up. It's just that I desperately wanted to. But it still felt like a really, really cool way to make a living. And it wasn't until I was talking to some people about this idea that one person who was an important mentor to me at the time said, Laura, that's way too niche. That'll never be scalable. You'll never make any money. And then another person said, Southern Girl Experience, cracking stock whips. That sure as shit sounds like a strip club I'd like to go to. And it was honestly these two comments that put me off creating the business that I really wanted to create. So at that point, I pivoted and I created Real Country. And Real Country was all about still teaching really cool, practical, awesome things, but focusing more on the tourism market. So 3 months later, in September 2016, after drawing the picture, writing out my triangle, and registering Southern Girl Limited and realcountry.co.nz, I quit my whole life. Everyone around me thought I was batshit. They were like, you are giving up an MBA, a corporate career that you've worked really hard for, to what? Go and teach people how to shoot guns and crack whips. You don't even know how to do that. You're having a midlife crisis. And unfortunately, I was pretty much on my own through this process. I packed up everything. I moved south and I got a job driving trucks for Nomad Safaris, taking tourists in and out of Macetown and Skippers Canyon in Queenstown. And the reason I did this is because although I had this big dream to set up a tourism company, I had no experience in tourism. I didn't know if it was the type of industry I wanted to be in, day out. So I got a job as a truck driver to see if I really would enjoy this. Now, the whole while I was doing this, I'm back to having absolutely no money. Now, I was on a 6-figure salary, but when I was leading the type of life that I was leading, incredibly unhappy, I was never thinking long term about anything. I had no savings, which is incredible to me. I had no investments and I had no money to fall back on to change my life and set this business up. How I spent all of that money each week, don't ask me, but a lot of it went on stuff that was just consumable, transactional, meaningless stuff. But here I was at 29. After 8 years in the corporate world and decent salaries, I had $2,580 in my bank account. I had no idea how to set up my own business, no idea about tourism. I didn't even know how to crack a whip or shoot a shotgun at this point. And I had to learn all of these things. So what business did I have actually setting up a business that taught other people how to do this? It is crazy when you think about it. If I had let one of those objections stop me doing what I wanted to do, then I definitely wouldn't be here today. I truly believe that there is no such thing as the perfect plan. I did my best at the time to create a bit of a roadmap and a bit of a to-do list and a bit of an idea of where I needed to go and the things I needed to achieve and tick off to get this business going. But there's no perfect plan, and the reason for this is when you start anything new, whether it's a hobby or a business, a side hustle or a new job, you don't know what you don't know. So the plans that you make in the beginning are never going to be the plans that actually see you through to completion. And I understood this pretty early on. So I did my best. I learned some stuff. I made some mistakes. I adjusted the plan. I executed. And then over and over and over. Fast forward a few years, and I was still working minimum wage part-time jobs, but I had a location for real country. I had insurance. I had a website. And I started purchasing the equipment that I needed to host the groups and the activities that I wanted to do. And I was hosting a group of Americans in my Nomad Safaris truck. I was talking about the business, Real Country, as if I was already doing it, as if it was the next best thing to come out of Queenstown for tourists to have a go at when they came here. And you know what? I sold these Americans on it and they wanted to book the next day. So that night I had to go to the warehouse, get a chili bin, get everything for the smoko, make a bacon and egg pie, make the scones. I picked up these 4 Americans in my little Holden Rodeo, put them in, drove them down to Kingston, took them out to shoot clays with a single loader clay thrower and a shitty synthetic shotgun. I had synthetic sort of crappy stock whips. I had a bow and arrow and an air rifle. And I'll never forget the TripAdvisor review. It said, Laura's yarns and stories are worth the price of admission alone. So it's not that they outrightly said the experience was shit and the activities were average, but they loved it. And they loved it despite my lack of experience, despite the lack of quality equipment. All of the things that I thought were really important, actually what's important is how you make people feel. And this was a really important lesson for me to learn early on. So from there, I started putting my money where my mouth is. I started cold emailing inbound tour operators, the people who organise big groups of people to come into New Zealand. And no one replied to that email except one, the operations manager for Kentucky. I basically did a cold email and the title of it was New Zealand's Best Experience. It got his attention. And at that point, all I was doing was taking people out, teaching them how to shoot guns, crack whips and fire bows and arrows in a mai on a private sheep station 45 minutes south of Queenstown. And at this point, I'd probably hosted maybe 5 or 6 groups, 2 of those with my dad, a couple with a couple of friends that I'd made along the way, and really had no idea what I was doing, but I loved it. So I sat down with Richie, the ops manager from Kentucky, who came to Queenstown to catch up. And we had a big yarn for a wee while. And then he said at the end of the meeting, actually, Laura, what I want to speak to you about is, can you create an inclusion product for us? And I was like, yes, having no idea what an inclusion product actually was. I said, yes. And he said, we need a farm show. Agrodome is getting a little bit touristy. We want something authentic, that's real, that's showcasing rural life in New Zealand. Can you do that for us? Yes, of course I can. Now, a disclaimer. At this point, although I'd grown up on a farm, my farming skills were pretty non-existent. But I just said yes anyway. He said, great. Starts in a year. I left the meeting. I called my mate, Ben, who I did the MBA with, and he was mad in management and tourism in Queenstown at the time. And I said, Ben, I just had the meeting with this ops manager. He wants me to develop an inclusion product for them. What does that mean? And he just said, get here now. An inclusion product, for those who don't know, is when a Kentucky guest buys a ticket to do the bus tour, the inclusion experience is included in that price. So it's not an optional activity. Every single person on the bus, the whole bus pulls in and does the activity. I had 1 year to put on a farm show. Now, whenever you think of farm shows, you think of sheep shearing, running a dog around some sheep, and some good yarns. Now, I didn't know how to run a dog, had never worked a working dog in my life, definitely did not know how to shear a sheep. And I also wanted to create something a little different. I didn't want to be compared to the incredible experience at Walter Peak across the lake, or what Agrodome does on a massive scale. So I adopted an ex-racehorse. I created a mustering show with a horse. I went to visit a guy in Timaru who makes stock whips, got a stock whip cracking lesson, and decided to do a little demo instead of just the little basic stuff I'd been doing. I got the guests to roll up an electric fence and just essentially have a really good time on a sheep station. Fast forward a year or so, I'm not working minimum wage jobs anymore. I had a full-time employee and we were hosting shows every week. I was doing what I loved, what brought me satisfaction, what I was good at, and it was amazing. Then COVID happened. Now, what I've missed out along this journey is the massive, steep learning curve that I had to go through to develop not only the business skills, but the practical skills to actually set up a business, operate the business, and create experiences like the farm show that I had no idea how to do. And it was along this pathway where I started to understand that just because you haven't done something before, it doesn't mean you can't. It just means you haven't done it yet. And every time I'd come up against something like learning how to work a working dog, oh my God, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to understand that. I don't even know how they work or where I'm meant to stand or what they do or how to whistle. But I volunteered at the local sheep dog trialing club, thinking that if I volunteered and gave my time, maybe someone in the club would volunteer their time and share their knowledge with me. And you know what they did? They helped me find a retired working dog. They helped me learn how to work it. I didn't think I'd ever be able to shear a sheep. But you get the right trainer and tutor in that shows you how, then all of a sudden you can. And then when you start doing these practical things that seem like such a massive obstacle, and then before long you're doing it yourself, your brain starts to rewire itself. Well, mine did anyway. And it started going, well, damn, what else do you think you can't do that maybe you're wrong about? When I was 29, in the former life, I didn't have any confidence. I had a pretty severe eating and binging disorder. I was making myself sick most days. I had a really bad, pretty much an addiction to drugs and alcohol on the weekends. And it was kind of a way to escape the negative thoughts and the dislike that I had for myself. And then every week I'd get to Monday morning and I'd be like, right, reset. We are starting again. We're doing this again. We're going to be better. We're going to be better. And I just never got better. I was in relationships with men that just used me, that cheated on me, that made me feel like crap, that fueled all of the lack of confidence that I had, that chose me because of the lack of confidence. I had a really cool career. I've done some cool shit. Like, I've been in advertising companies in South Africa. I have set up a property management company. I've sold real estate. I had an awesome job in a cyber analytics firm working with like data scientists and data engineers. And like all of the things I've done have been really cool, and I've learned a lot and I've enjoyed parts of it, but none of it was ever driven by me. I was super lost. And when I think back on how I got so lost, I mean, like most things, it always goes back to your childhood. Now, I grew up on a sheep and deer farm in Southland and had an incredible rural upbringing. growing up on a farm is amazing. You learn that hard work comes before play. You develop an affinity for the land, an affinity for animals, and you just have all these advantages that a lot of kids that don't grow up on the farm don't have. But it wasn't all hunky-dory. I mean, my parents divorced when I was quite little. My stepdad wasn't the nicest guy. I got really badly bullied at school. I kind of was always a little bit different, a little bit outspoken, quite bullish. Never really learned how to shut my mouth, and always got myself into situations that just seemed to open me up for ridicule. Now, all of these things kind of just slowly ate away at my self-esteem. And then when I started making bad decisions when it came to men as a teenager and as a young adult, getting myself in situations that I'm not proud of, saying not yes but not no when I really meant fuck no, not knowing how to exit situations because I was so worried about making other people feel uncomfortable. I was constantly putting other people's feelings before my own in kind of every situation with life. I didn't know how that was ever going to change. I didn't have a roadmap to change. But something started happening when I started making my own decisions to move south, to set up a company, even though I had no idea what I was doing, even though a lot of the way I was learning the skills that I needed were embarrassing or awkward. I had to put myself out there to learn these things. I had to get uncomfortable. And something happened along that process. It started with this feeling of just because I haven't doesn't mean I can't. But then what it translated into is I was changing into the person who I should have always been, a Southern girl. And when I started to become my authentic, real self, I stumbled across the love of my life. We started creating a life together that we're really proud of and that we love. It's been 9 years since then. We have 2 children. We have our own home in Kingston. And Dan, my husband, has been one of the biggest reasons why I've gotten to where I've gotten to and why I've healed so much. But I never would have met him had I not first met myself. So we've got all this going on in the background. And then we get to March 2020. I'd given up everything I'd worked so hard for. I'd gone through the ridicule of, when are you going to go back and get a real job? Are you having a midlife crisis? Are you absolutely insane? And I'd built a business where I wasn't only employing myself, I was employing someone else, and things were just awesome. And then overnight, everything was just taken away. When COVID happened, we were at the Wanaka AMP show. Holly, my team member, and I were hosting like a farm animal experience, and it was awesome just interacting with the rural community. We were on the highest of highs. It was the end of the best summer season we'd ever had. And then I get the phone call from the ops manager, Richie of Kentucky. The one phone call that I didn't like getting from him. And he just said, look, Laura, all our tours have been cancelled for the foreseeable future. And then after that phone call, one by one, everything toppled over. And within 2 days, my business went from a thriving business to zero income. And no even potential of that changing. I had to let my staff member go. I had to rehome a lot of the farm animals that I'd adopted on the farm. I drank a lot of whiskey over that time. I didn't answer a lot of phone calls because I didn't know what to say. I had a lot of people checking in on me, but I felt so embarrassed. I felt like a massive failure. Because although the business had been taken away from me through no fault of my own, my reaction to it, it didn't matter. It was still gone. Everything I'd sacrificed and put on the line for and put myself out for was just ripped away. And it wasn't until I answered the phone from my dad one day and he just goes, Rosie, that's what my family calls me, not Laura, Rosie. Rosie, in 10 years' time, this is going to be nothing but a blip on your balance sheet. And you see, my dad has been farming for half a century now, nearly. He's been through it all, the ups, the downs, almost losing the farm, all of the challenges that come along with farming. And he understood that although it felt like COVID was going to last forever, although it felt like lockdown was going to last forever, he knew that it wouldn't. And then in response to this, instead of saying, thanks, Dad, I heard myself say, oh, but I don't deserve this. And it was as soon as that came out of my mouth, I went, oh my gosh, because using the phrase, I don't deserve this when something doesn't go your way is the most crybaby, whiny phrase in the entire English language. And it had just come out of my mouth. And it was at that point that I decided to just pull my bloody socks up. I was offered a really good role in a rural company and head of marketing. It was really tempting to take that role, go back to the security, the salary. But I just knew deep down that I'd end up exactly back where I was. I hadn't progressed and done all this stuff and developed and built this business and made all these changes just to scrap it and go back to the beginning again. So instead of taking on a really nice cushy role, I decided to go teat sealing. Dairy cows for $19.50 an hour. I'd get up at 2:30 in the morning, feed out to all my animals, run my dogs, drive an hour and a half down south, teat seal dairy cows all day, turn around, come back, feed out, run the dogs, go to bed knackered. And I did that to give myself some breathing room. And it was over that time I reflected back on my original business idea, the Southern Girl experience. And although tourism was well and truly dead for the meantime, all the while I'd been doing these tourism experiences, I'd also been running practical day-long workshops for teenage girls called the Southern Girl Finishing School. I would take up to 10 girls at a time. They would come to the farm. I would teach them how to back trailers, shoot guns, work with horses, strain up a fence, just practical, awesome activities to help show them, like I showed myself, just because you haven't doesn't mean you can't. The kick that I got out of it, the change in these girls after just spending one day with them on farm. And these girls weren't from a farm necessarily. They were from all walks of life, from all over the South Island. It was just thrilling. So I decided to double down on that. And it was at the same time that I got an incredible opportunity in June 2020 to set up the Fairlight Foundation, a registered charity on a neighbouring station, Fairlight Station, to run a female-only 12-month on-farm internship. See, I'd worked in male-dominated industries my whole life, and farming in New Zealand, just like it is everywhere around the world, it's incredibly male-dominated. And if you're a young woman and you want to get a foot in the door, if you're not from a farm, it's just really hard to get given a chance. So we created a foundation with the owners of Fairlight Station that takes 3 women every year. They've got to be age 21 and over. They've got to have some form of tertiary education in ag to show they've got skin in the game. We take 3 of these women every year. They live on Fairlight Station for 12 months, and we teach them everything they need to become a proficient and capable shepherd on a deer, sheep and beef property, which is an insane property. We teach them all the stockmanship skills, like how to strain up a fence, how to drive a tractor, how to shear a sheep, how to train a dog, all of that stuff, and that's really awesome. But the coolest part of what we do there is we help these women every year develop personal and professional competence. Because the thing is, it's not good enough to just be good at your job, especially as a woman in a male-dominated industry. You need to be able to have the confidence in yourself to put yourself forward for opportunities, to set boundaries, to hold your own, to enforce the expectations that you have. These are the things that are most difficult to teach. And it's so funny because every year when the interns start at Fairlight, I always ask them, what do you think is going to be the most challenging part of the year for you? And they always focus on the practical. They always focus on the, gosh, I don't think I'll ever be able to shear a sheep, or I'll never be able to train a working dog. But actually, the practical stuff is the easiest stuff to acquire because it's taught well, they're well supported. Just because you haven't done anything doesn't mean you can't. The hardest stuff to teach is teaching them to be personally and professional confident. That stuff takes time, it takes pressure, it takes putting them in uncomfortable situations. And at the end of the day, we have 12 months to set these women up for the rest of their lives. So it's been 5 years since the first intake. It's been my absolute privilege working alongside these women every year. I get such a kick out of helping them develop when they leave. As soon as they leave the program as graduates, we keep interacting. We keep helping them advance their careers because our mission for the charity is not to get women into jobs, it's to advance their career into leadership roles. And to me, leadership is not a job title, it's a state of mind. Think of it more like anyone can be a leader because anyone can be a role model. But before you can lead others, you need to learn how to lead yourself. And that is what we focus on. So I've been doing that since COVID. It's been really cool. Real country's kicked back in. That's also been really cool. I've had 2 wee kids. That's been the best part of the whole thing. And in addition to all of this, after COVID, I started getting asked to speak at high schools. Now, despite what you may be seeing here, I was not a confident speaker. And the thought of speaking at high schools was terrifying. But after COVID, a lot of kids were struggling with all of the uncertainty. And so I just said yes to, again, another really uncomfortable situation. And I spoke at 10 high schools throughout Southland. I then started to get asked to speak at Rotary clubs, at Lions clubs, at community clubs. And so I'd travel around and do that. And turns out that you can develop public speaking skills. You can get comfortable when you've previously been really, really uncomfortable. I went from needing to read off notes like this on my phone to just glancing down at bullet points to not having any notes at all. I went from speaking for free to charging thousands of dollars as a keynote speaker for corporate events. And I have been privileged enough to jump on the radio. I've been on TV a couple of times. I've emceed some pretty amazing events, all because I was willing to put myself outside of my comfort zone once again and develop a skill that I didn't know I'd ever had. Now, it wasn't until Isla was born, Isla is 3.5 right now, that I started to actually really address some of those issues that had plagued me right through. And when I say issues, I'm specifically referring to my binging and eating disorder, my fingernail biting. And it turns out that those things are just symptoms of all of the inner turmoil that I had going on. I was still making myself sick when I was pregnant. I was still making myself sick when I was breastfeeding. And although I'd come such a long way, I'd done all of this incredible stuff and all of this incredible work, and I'd earned confidence in all of these different areas, I still hadn't actually properly addressed the things that had been with me for a long time that were really holding me back. So I started going to an incredible hypnotherapist in Queenstown, and it really worked for me. She helped me understand that the things that I was doing to harm myself were from things that I had interacted with as a child that my subconscious was in control of. I'd been to counselling before about all this stuff, of course, and counselling can work for some people. It helped me understand why I made myself sick and why I bite my nails, and I got given some tools to deal with it, but my subconscious is way more powerful than my conscious and my willpower, and it just never worked. And there's something about having children that makes you go, I do not want to pass this on to them. I do not want them to struggle the way that I struggled. And it was the most powerful motivator to make me actually be the change that I knew my daughter needed me to be. It was the best thing I ever did. It took such a weight out of my brain. I stopped being such a people pleaser, such a high performer. I stopped putting so much pressure on myself. I stopped being anxious all the time. I stopped reacting and started just relaxing. I started enjoying the journey more rather than focusing on every single destination. I understood that although I'm a very competitive person, and the reason why I'd never felt successful up until this point is because every time I achieved something, I would always be looking straight away for the next challenge. And I understood after therapy and really tackling some things that if I constantly relied on my own accomplishments in order to feel successful, I was just never going to get there. So for me now, the whole definition of success has totally changed. I think if you'd asked me in my 20s, it would have been a job title and money in the bank. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, it would have been making money on my own without working for someone else, aka setting up my own business. If you ask me now, it's probably two things. Professional success comes, I guess I feel accomplished when I help other people accomplish. Because as I said, if I relied on my own accomplishments, I would never get there. But I love, and I get so much joy and satisfaction out of seeing other people accomplish because of one small thing or one big thing I've done. Personal success is a little different. Personal success to me is being a present mum, is having full autonomy over how I run my life. It's being strong, being healthy, and having the lifestyle that I'm really passionate about. A lot of people ask, what's next? Because what I've done and changed and who I've become in the last 8 or 9 years, it's a complete 180 on who I was. But after doing all of the work on myself in every area of my life, I've gotten to a point where I have more than what most people will ever have. I have enough. I have enough of everything. I'm fulfilled. I'm comfortable. So all I actually want to do now is help other women get to this point. I want other women to feel like they have enough. I spoke at a massive women's conference a couple of months ago, and I asked the room, I said, hands up here who feels successful. There was a room of about 250 women, and about 10 women put their hands up. I just about cried. You know, these are women who have life experience that I will never have. The shared knowledge in this room of women was so inspiring and incredible, and yet the vast majority of those women did not feel successful. There needs to be a huge shift in the way that we as women define success. And in order to do that, I truly believe it's about helping women understand who they are, getting brutally honest about what they want and what's important to them, and helping them earn real confidence in who they are and in their abilities. So for me, I didn't just look in the mirror one day and go, you are going to be a confident, successful person. You are going to be a confident, successful person. I don't believe in those affirmations. I don't believe in consuming inspirational content. I don't believe in reading and consuming. I believe in action. I believe in adopting a zero option mentality to get from where you are to where you want to be. I believe in being bold and getting uncomfortable. I believe in trying new things. I believe in execution, implementation. I don't believe in dreaming. The one thing that sticks with me always is that life now is limitless. And there is absolutely nothing that is beyond anyone's grasp if they are just determined enough to do it. No one can go back and change their beginning, but everyone can choose to start again right now and change their end.